Welcome everyone to the Compassionate Response, Humanizing Conversations Among First Responders and Their Families. My name is Suze, and I'm here today with my colleagues Jen and Jody. And joining us today for our conversation are Ryan and James from the Greater Sudbury Police. James Jefferson is a 16-year veteran and current mental health and wellness coordinator, has turned his lived experience with PTSD and recovery into a mission to support others. He's a keynote speaker and national award recipient for his work in resiliency and advocacy. We have joining us as well Ryan Hutton, who has 23 years of service, has worked in specialized units, including Criminal Investigation Division, Drug Enforcement Unit, passionate advocate about mental health and in policing. And he's a co-founder of Warriors Coffee, and that's a space for officers to share and connect. So I'm really, like I said, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I can see these conversations very much, as our title says, to humanize the experiences in a very real way. With that being said, I do want to remind you that sometimes these conversations around trauma and struggle can be personally activating, and just to encourage you to be really in tune with your body, your mind, your heart. Take care of yourself however you see fit. These conversations are important and necessary, but you do have a choice how you want to engage. So before we get started, how about we do a little bit of a grounding check-in, see how we're all arriving in this space today. Jody, do you want to start? How are you arriving today? Anything on your mind and your heart?
Yeah, thank you. So pleased to be here. So my name is Jody Hicks. I'm clinical supervisor and manager of mental health services at Dalton Associates and clinical supervisor of the Encompas program. Also a registered psychotherapist. So how I'm arriving as I tune in, is really excited to be here, really honored and grateful to be a part of this conversation. I notice that I'm feeling tired too. The weather really does take it out of me. I get my energy from being outside, grew up on a farm, and so really appreciate being out in nature, and it's harder to be in nature when it's so cold. So noticing that I'm craving that more time outside. So tired and grateful. That's kind of how I'm arriving. Yeah, thanks for checking in.
Thanks for sharing. Jen, how are you arriving today?
Good morning. I am Jen Welsh. I'm the program manager of our first responder division with Dalton Associates. I am arriving with hope. I'm arriving with hope, and I'm very grateful to Ryan and James for taking some time from their day to meet with us. And we've done some planning around this conversation. And each time we host these conversations, it's invigorating really, and brings me back to the honor and privilege I have of being engaged with this work and our team, and really walking beside people through their journey, wherever that may be. So I have that's how I'm landing here today. I'm recently back from the sun, so I think I still have a lot of sun that I still am holding. But I too love being outside as well, like Jody. So I was out earlier with the dog today for a bit of a walk in the wind, but it was nice to be outside. So really excited to be here for this chat.
Thanks for sharing. Ryan, do you want to do a little bit of a check-in and talk about how you're arriving today?
Sure. So quite humbled to be here and to be asked to be here. But on top of that, I'm ready also. I got all the things I needed to get done off my checklist today. Had some meaningful conversations with my daughter, and just coming back from a really good family weekend. So in a good space, and I don't have anything weighing on the back of my head that I wanted to or needed to get done before being here, so I can feel fully committed. So
thanks for sharing. James, how are you arriving today?
I would say with a lot of gratitude. Gratitude for the ability to have a voice, to have a platform, to share, to create a ripple effect. And And gratitude and looking back when we have these talks, it forces us to sometimes look back and remember the person we were and the person we had to escape. And, this is one of those moments. And to do this with Ryan, someone I've been in a cruiser with, someone I've worked plain clothes with and spent a lot of years together, it is an amazing experience to have a brother that you can have a soundboard and share this kind of conversation with. So really just excited. And I know we have an OPC recruit class with Greater Sudbury tuning in today. So I want to shout out to them.
Amazing.
And just very excited.
Thank you. That's amazing. And yeah, I love that you're both here. You both share that connection, and yeah, that relationship is so important. We know the value of connection and relationship in this work. I'm arriving. I think I'm like Jody. I'm a little bit tired. It's been a really, really busy week. It's interesting. Last night I received a phone call came up on my phone, and it was from my son's friend who he plays hockey with. He plays for the Halliburton Huskies, so he's up north. And it was one of his teammates calling, and it was 11 o'clock at night. And immediately when I saw the number, I went into that anxiety panic mode of what is wrong. And that is pretty deeply ingrained in me from being a first responder spouse. I am the widow of a first responder who struggled with PTSD and addiction, and much of that was in silence in our home. So I hold the stories of both his and my experience. And so, yeah, it's even though I'm a widow, I still very much feel those, those things. And so whenever I see people like James and Ryan come forward and talk about their own personal journeys and advocating for more awareness and doing the work to show others that recovery is within reach, I too feel hope for others, and really looking forward to diving a little bit deep into this conversation. Your friends, your colleagues, your passionate advocates. I am curious about both of your individual experiences, but also curious how you both came to connect and collaborate together. So maybe along the way we can talk about that as well. So I'm wondering if we want to start off with just giving you an opportunity to share a little bit about your journey, what it's been like, what's happened, what it's like today. If one of you want to start that off, draw straws.
Well, I know Ryan's going to insinuate that I go first, so
I figured that.
Yes, he's gracious like that. Really, you know what? I've told my story, hundreds of times, and sometimes it's a very relatable story with first responders. I was involved in a very traumatic incident early in my career. It was a fatal shooting, but I approached the job with a very egotistical mindset of, play that facade, play that, avatar, and that everything is good because I had a standard that I had to meet every day, and I had a standard that I had to show my peers. And that ended up bringing me into drug work and detective work and undercover work, and that was a slippery slope in itself. That brought about new challenges that compiled my trauma. And I rode that wave for years. And what I've learned is suppression works until it doesn't. Eventually that bottom's going to fall out. And finally, life kind of stopped me. I had a physical injury that forced me off work. And that was my journey of healing. I had to navigate what it was like to be off work, some of those pressures and some of those unforeseen challenges. And then finally making that decision to heal. And what did that look like? And who do I surround myself with? And what are my habits and rituals that I make a priority every single day? And I had to understand that it was not just going to be an overnight success. This was going to take time and patience and empathy for myself. And riding that experience, and then by a full year of being fully immersed in my healing, I came out of it. I transformed into that post-traumatic growth, type of person, and I was able to return to work and really, be a voice and be a support for other officers and our policing professionals. Being able to utilize my own experience. And Ryan was one of the catalysts that allowed me the strength and confidence to embark on this journey with our service. And he's always been a soundboard. And you know what? I've struggled with addiction, struggled with every facet of post-traumatic stress that really can be thrown at someone. But I'm standing here or sitting, mind you, but you know what? With a smile, but with a tenacity that, you know what, you can beat post-traumatic stress, you can beat mental illness. It just takes really the right circumstances, the right approach, and it takes loving yourself. And that was a big takeaway in my journey.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you're saying about the standard, the expectation, and is there something that you've been able to, in looking back or in reflection, be able to identify where that came from, where this notion of you had the expectation that you had to um, conduct yourself in a certain way? You know, we talk about policing culture, we talk about those messages that are really, really long-standing and we're trying to change. But what was that like for you personally? Where did you feel like you were getting that message that you had to live up to this specific standard and expectation?
Well, that was ingrained from day one.
Mhm.
That was ingrained from our coach officers, from, you know, some of our supervisors, especially when you're a young officer. The old adage was, you know what, shut your mouth and go to work. And you know what, status quo, you don't rock the boat. And you should have, you know, a full year on and still not even say a word. You don't book sick. And really, there was no training, no messaging on any kind of mental illness or self-care. I didn't know what post-traumatic stress was. I didn't, you know that it was a potential in this profession. And you look back and it's almost mind-blowing that we weren't having those conversations. We're dealing with traumatic events, and the only thing that really was the priority was just getting the work done and being an
Mhm.
effective officer. And then you end up building that mentality or that narrative that you can't show it in front of the other officers because you hear other officers talking about other officers. We are some of the worst profession from talking about our own in a negative way. We don't lift our people up. We almost push them down. So we know that, well, if I say something, people are going to talk. And
Mhm.
so I'm just not going to say anything. And then it's for me, the biggest takeaway out of all of it was it's not who I believed I was, it's who I believed I wasn't. I believed I was a police officer. I believed I was a high achiever, someone very competent. I did not believe I was someone who could succumb to mental illness. And because of that, I distanced myself, dissociated, and tried to suppress as much as I can. And that ended up just being a very unhealthy implosion, you know, down the road.
Yeah, and I know that we talked about this in our conversation before, that if you are signing up for this job, you are, it's not a matter of if you're going to experience trauma, it's a matter of when. And there's often this, you had said, you know, you reinforced narrative, reinforced messages from the coach officer, from leadership, to keep your head down, to do your job, um, not rock the boat. And you're taught to do the job, but you're not taught how to go home after the job. And that can really impact so many different areas and so many of your life. And these are important things that we need to talk about and shift as we move forward. Uh, so I really appreciate you sharing that insight and your experience with early policing and uh, how it informed you showing up in your role, how it informed you to show up in your job, and how it impacted you. Do you see that things are changing a little bit now? Do you see what is where do you think things are landing now in terms of, you said that there's new recruits, you know, that so what's happening now that's different, and what do we need to continue to do?
I would say we're in that middle ground. We're in that
Yeah.
transformational, you know, kind of phase, but there's still people who don't believe in mental illness. There's still people that think an officer being off work is a vacation. So there's still a lot of ignorance to be had. But on the other side of that wall, there's a lot of open-minded people, and our officers now coming into the profession are more awake and in tune to how they're feeling, how they're thinking, how the job is impacting them, and they're setting priorities. Officers, back in the day, in that resilience or that Renaissance kind of mentality, the job was first. And for me, the job was first, family second, everything else third. Whereas now it has to be, family, loved ones first, your self-care first. The job is a beautiful job, but it's something you do. It's not who you are. And that's how you have to really approach it day after day. Take pride in what you do and be the best officer you can, but it's not your defining quality.
Yeah, and I think that you gave an accurate representation. Well, talking about that middle ground, right? Like we can see even in our programs and the supports and services out there that we're really trying to reduce the stigma and humanize these conversations, but we still have work to do in terms of shifting the narrative. And there is a law, I mean, that's a whole systems issue we can get into, right? But you're right, it's that identity can be so wrapped up into your job and your role as a first responder. And we know that, you're considered the helper, you're considered the person that runs into chaos. And so when you're in a position where you're struggling and you find yourself needing help, it almost can feel very conflicting, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Ryan, are you ready to chime in and share a little bit about where you've been, where you're at, and your thoughts and reflections?
So I'm going to get to my connection with James and what was going on shortly. So starting work in Toronto in 2001, shortly after 9/11, the mindset was kind of shocking, the number of people and the size of classes of officers that were going through the police college. It was the highest numbers they had ever seen. We're getting to divisions. There's lots of us. And we're taught right away, just what James said, they don't talk until basically you're spoken to. Don't write in your book until you're told to. You don't know anything, just sit there. Coming from a police family, I kind of knew that hierarchy and how to be a rookie and how to just bide my time. But it was hard. You're in traumatic situations and there's no outlet. There was no talking about your feelings. There was no debriefing in lineups. There was really no conversation that was being had. And speaking to somebody about it, like recommendations for professionals, was never addressed. So it was really, you kind of just sank or swim. Either you got it and you managed it and you figured it out. And however you figured it out, you came to work every day and you just kind of managed as you went. It started to have some things pop up in those, beers after night shifts to go to sleep, until you realize that's not working, and then you got to come up with something else. But there was no real sounding board of who to talk to because everybody was doing the same thing. When I came to Sudbury, I was I was only on the road for a very short time, and I ended up in the drug unit working with James. And it wasn't until after he had left the drug unit and after we had both finished our time there that it came out where James was talking openly about what was happening. And it really hit me when that one moment that he had his, this is it moment. We were working together. We communicated on our radios. We started our shift together. This happened in the middle. We came back. There was no conversation. And we find out this like years later. So it was really kind of surreal, I guess, that we almost ended up in that moment, and that as tight as we were and as friendly as we were and as much as we were doing work things together and after work, we weren't really communicating. We weren't having the hard conversations. we would debrief if something didn't go well, but we weren't debriefing. How did that make you feel when, you were chasing that guy and you pulled a gun out?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel? Like, nobody talked about it, right? It was, you laughed it off a little bit and then you went home and kind of had a, wow, that, that could have gone one of two ways, and I'm lucky it went the way it did, right? And those were, those happen every day, right? You don't have to be in a drug unit to be having that situation happen. And that's when it kind of hit me, like James was off, and our service didn't tell anybody anything. Why he was off, what was going on, his embarrassment kept them from calling us or calling anybody to tell us what was happening. And it wasn't until I had just that moment to say, I'm coming over and we're going to have a chat if you're good with it. And then let's see what we can do. And when he came back and was telling his story, I'm like, there's others out here. And if no one else is going to talk about it, then I'll talk about it. And, at that point I had about 20 years on, and, I'm not the only one out there with 20 years on. And we've talked about this, that has had that, what are they going to do to me? Right? What are they going to do to me? Put me on the road working night shift? I can handle that, right? So it's hard to get to that, and it's hard to not care about promotion and not care about going to a specialty unit. Luckily, I had done most of those things already. So I wasn't, chasing the carrot anymore. I was now focusing on something that has become more important to me, and getting that message out is more important than anything else. And there's repercussions. I know it. I hear it. I see it. And I've resigned myself to the fact that I'm not going anywhere. I'll probably be in uniform for the long haul now, and that's okay. But that's a, I don't want to get into the organizational plan and my belief on why it is that it's not reinforced and why it is they're not putting people where they need to put them. We're lucky to have James Jefferson in a role that he has. We're lucky that he's allowed to have that, stand to be able to talk to people, to share his story, and it to be organizationally promoted and supported. But they're not eager to make it easy for anybody else. So I take it where I can get it. And that's why these are so important.
Yeah, for sure. This, like I said before, this is an important conversation. James, I'm just wondering, Ryan had mentioned about the work that you do as the mental health and wellness coordinator. Do you see any common themes or specific concerns that are being brought forward from officers that are not being, the needs are not being met or not being addressed in terms of supports and services that are out there?
There are some themes, and some I would say it's just across the board in our profession in general. A big part of it is just supervisor awareness. They are the all-seeing eye of their people. They see when they come in, they see when they clock out, they hear the calls that they're going to. And a lot of times I don't hear what calls are going on the road. There's just too much to keep track of. So to have those supervisors pull someone in and have a conversation, a good, heartfelt conversation, it goes so far. And even if they don't have that capability, refer on to a peer supporter or something like that. I would say majority of officers are so preoccupied on what other officers think of them. The amount of times I've heard, like, I can't go off because my shift needs me. We're running short. People are burnt out. People are struggling. I can't do this. So, what we in essence set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. We sacrifice, we self-sacrifice, for the greater good of this profession. And then really it's, that reintegrative process of how do we get people back to work? How do we work with WSIB and how do we form that relationship that's proactive, progressive, and productive? We're missing the mark still. There's still a lot of gaps in how we support our people. we need all hands on deck. And unfortunately, right now within our profession, deployment is such an issue across the board that drawing from any kind of resources is extremely difficult. So we're trying to do this with the least amount of, person power that we can conjure up. So it's difficult in that respect.
Yeah, and definitely multifaceted. And I did want to just kind of go back to Ryan, what you had said. And again, I know like not wanting to get too much into the organizational structures and those kind of things, but an important thing that you brought up, I kind of felt a little bit sad when I heard it, was that, you came to a place of where you felt like you can speak out, but you know that there may be repercussions, for that, or you may not be moving into more specialty units like that, almost like that. And I've seen that in, in my personal life and my professional life, where there's that fear, right? There's that fear of, if you come forward and you're honest about your struggle, that instead of being supported and guided through feeling like you're being wrapped, that there's that fear that there's going to be consequences. And the reason why I really like these conversations and coming together and being able to kind of talk about those things is that I know that there's going to be people who are tuning in, that want to be part of that active change, that want to be those people that want to start to move away from those kind of things that support that narrative. This can be like a thought stopper, thought starter conversation in terms of, that's real. You just described that when you were struggling with your mental health and you were in struggle and you decided that you wanted to come forward, there is that element of, well, it's either I get honest and talk about it and humanize it for other people, and also because it helps you to talk about it. We know talking about our struggle, but that underlying of there may also be implications. So yeah, just it's interesting. It makes me think a lot about that. Jen, did you want to pop in and say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add on to that with, in my lens as well, coming from the OPP and having been in the uniform side for just shy of 18 years. I think as we, I applaud anyone who, it's really about choosing yourself.
Yeah.
Choosing to care for yourself and care for your family. And the job, as I navigated my wellness journey, I had to choose that. I wanted to be present for my kids and my family. And the OPP was getting the absolute best of me, and I recognized my family wasn't. So it was really about turning that narrative. It takes a lot of strength. It's courage to say, I need to look after myself. And I think as we continue these conversations and really change that lens of narrative and acknowledge the work that you're doing. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. It's day by day. But really look after yourself. You can't do this job without putting a lot of stuff, a lot of rocks in your backpack of whatever units and, jobs you've done. You're going to collect a lot of stuff that you have to manage. And when it gets feeling heavy, that's your sense of, today's the day, now's the time. I have to look after myself, and I want to be present for my family, present for my, for my coworkers, my colleagues. And you're only going to be able to do that by looking after yourself and getting those tools and supports in place for you to have a healthy career. And I too remember early on in my brand new 0 to 5 years, you're like a deer in headlights, soaking up. You're a sponge, you're learning, you're trying to figure it all out. It's very different than OPC. And, you feel as though that those first 5 years are really instrumental in, feeling as though you have to prove yourself to your platoon mates. So to our recruits listening, off the beginning of your careers, really set yourself in good, with some good supports and tools, resources at the onset of your career.
Yes.
And certainly it will only help you along the way.
And we're seeing that shift in the Encompas program as well, where we're seeing new recruits reach out and say that they want to get a baseline for their own mental health, so that because sometimes the changes can be so subtle. Sometimes you may not recognize that the job is impacting you. It could show up in various forms and be translated in very different areas of your life. And so being able to establish right off the hop when you're starting your career that this is where I'm at right now, and having those check-in points to be able to know if I'd be able to identify when things are changing or shifting symptomatically can be really beneficial in terms of being able to keep on top of it. Like we said earlier, that it's not a matter of if it's or when it's going to happen. You're going to be exposed to trauma. You're going to be exposed to hard calls. So having your backpack, your toolkit all ready for when those times happen. And you both are definite powers of example and lived examples of how to take care of yourself. I know that it came with a price tag, and it was not easy to get to be in a system where we weren't in the middle. When you both started out your career, we were very much at the other ends of where, like you said, it was you keep your head down, you don't talk about it, and you just do your job. So to have you both here and sharing that you've been able to move through that space and now be able to share how you've done that is inspiring. And it's like we said earlier, it's creates that sense of hope for other people who are starting on the job. Is there anything that you would share to those that are struggling right now, whether they're, no matter how long they've been on the job? We know that sometimes people get on the job and they realize that this is hard work, or they've been here for 20 years. Is there something that either of you would share in terms of how to take care of yourself in that middle space of we're not quite there yet, that middle space of,
we call it the messy middle.
Yeah, the messy middle of, we want to say it's okay to not be okay, but is it really, it's hard. It's a really tough spot to be in.
When I think about mental illness and trauma, in the first responder policing profession, and when people are hard on themselves and what they experience, this disorder takes lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and I've heard some people describe some people who have made that choice. And the best cop you'll ever meet, the top cop. I've heard, best cop in Hamilton. Like, they describe these officers like they're superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And this should tell you we're merely flesh, blood, and bone, and we're all susceptible to breaking, giving the right parameters and circumstances. We are essentially working in a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And we are not sociopaths. These calls will impact us. It doesn't have to traumatize us to the point of insulating ourselves and shutting us off from life, but it can change our state. It can change the person we are. And we have to be really in tune with that early on in our career of how am I being impacted by these calls? How am I sleeping? What kind of conversations am I having? How am I coming home to my family? These are all things we think that they will just evaporate. They will change like the passing season. As long as we keep pushing it aside, it doesn't. This does not going away. And if you struggle today, what's that going to look like in a year time? What's that going to look like in 2 years? What's that going to look like in your marriage, as a parent, as a friend, or just how you see yourself? It's going to take its toll, so it won't go away. So if you're impacted, which is something you should expect, like if you're going to some of these calls and you don't think you're going to be impacted, you're doing yourself a disservice. You will be. What am I going to do when I'm impacted? Have those skills in place. And like we said earlier, do it when you're healthy. Don't backtrack and then try to pick up the pieces when your mind's riddled with trauma. When you're healthy, find your support system. Who do I have to talk to? What kind of therapist do I think I need? What are my good habits and rituals in coping? Know yourself before that storm hits. And once it does, like I said, post-traumatic stress is 1 in 4, 1 in 5 officers.
Mhm.
Post-traumatic symptoms are 80+%
Yeah.
experiencing it. So that should just tell you it's not if, it's when. Rise up, check your ego at the door. And this is a human being in this profession. We are not superheroes. So take care of yourself and value and prioritize yourself first.
Well said. Yeah. Ryan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the likening having your mental health checked to going to the dentist, going to a doctor, if or physiotherapist if there's something wrong with your body, and the trying to normalize the going to see a mental health professional if you think something's wrong. So that's been talked about a lot, and that comparison has been used a lot. But what isn't talked about is there's a lot of people that have to get over that. I don't want to go to the dentist because I know it's going to be a root canal, and I don't want to have a root canal, right? So they just live with it. I don't want to go see a physiotherapist because I know they're going to tell me I have to stop running, right? And I don't want to stop running. So I think what a lot of people are scared, and then they wait till it's way too late or it's gotten so bad that it can't be fixed, and then now you have a much bigger problem. So I think with the mental health side of things, people are so afraid to go see a professional, especially in relation to our job, because they think that professional is going to say, you can't go to work, or you can't do this job anymore, or you need to take some time away. And you can't take time away because we're so short, right?
It's your
But
identity. And that's
yeah,
your
and it's
identity.
your identity. But in reality, you could go see a psychiatrist and they could say, you're okay, you're doing fine. You have an OSI, you don't have PTSD, or maybe you are just having some issues with sleep that they can help you with. So I think the fear is always the worst. Like, people don't want to go to the doctor because they think they have cancer, and they don't want to be told they have cancer, because if they get told they have cancer, they're going to die. Well, regardless, if you have cancer, if you don't get it fixed, it's only going to get worse, right? But if your mental health is suffering and you're too afraid to go look at it, it's no different, right? But that's the mentality that we got to get people past. But we have that other part that people are susceptible to when it's not mental health, right? So I think it's a natural and a very common reaction to anything that's going to change what you're doing with your life. The problem with mental health is, you can hide it a little bit longer than, if you've sprained your ankle, you can't hide that you sprained your ankle, right? If you've hurt your back, you can't hide that you hurt your back. And if, you're hiding an abscess tooth and there's a big bump on the side of your face, everyone's going to know. But mental health in your brain, like, you can mask it, and people do it too long. And luckily we have a safe space for the new people out there, and even senior guys and girls out there that are on the job, or in our comm centers or anywhere where they're dealing with constant trauma all the time. We're lucky enough to have a safe space in James or myself, or our meetings, where you can come out and talk without being judged. If you don't have that, you got to find it. You got to find somebody you trust, because it's not going to be a conversation in the hallway. Like, I can talk in the hallway with anybody about, how they hurt their knee chasing somebody, but no one's going to talk to me in the hallway about, what the mental side of that moment was, because they don't want anybody to know, right?
Mhm.
So it's creating a safe space within the organization, and then making sure the people that you're working with know these are the people you can go to talk to. We have peer support, but not everybody feels comfortable going to all the members of peer support, right? So it's having support for somebody like James, who can be given the time to talk to anybody that's willing to come and talk to him, right? Or have, staff from a therapy group that can be present if they need them to be. But, as much as I would love these conversations to be held in lineups and when we do something good that, senior command or your staff sergeant, your sergeants come into lineup and say, there's a mental health walk next week. I'm really hoping you guys all check it out. That's never going to happen. It's, well, not never, but it's not happening now, right? Which is sad, but it doesn't reinforce what we needed to reinforce, right?
Yeah, and I was even thinking about, when we start this conversation today, and we start a lot of conversations with how are you arriving today? Imagine having that at the beginning of shift, have in your lineup, how are you arriving today? And opening up that dialogue and opening up that space. It almost seems like, I can see you're smiling and I know what you're thinking, but it's that would be in a perfect world, right? But there's so many different layers that have to be shifted through. But starting can change with one person, and I see you both trying to make those little pockets of change and to reframe the position of, like you said, reaching out to a therapist and being that something is wrong with you. Well, reaching out to a therapist, reframing it in a way that let's look at all the things that are right with you, because when you go to a therapist, you're able to work with a therapist to identify what your strengths are, where your resiliency is, and be able to, how can you tap into what is innately inside of you right now to help you move through these difficult moments. So we try to encourage that and we try to send that message out, but there's a lot of resistance for sure in these spaces. Yeah. James, are you seeing, is there a lot, I'm just wondering if you collect stats or if you have any kind of number, that idea of maybe even monthly or yearly of people that are connecting with you as the mental health and wellness coordinator? Or is it kind of hit and miss, or do you feel like
It's been ongoing for 6+ years. From the moment I
Wow.
gave my first speech and really gave our officers and staff permission to, not be okay. From that moment on, I feel privileged to have been on the other side of that conversation, and that people have faith to sit and talk to me. And that's, mainly because they know they're not going to be judged. They know they're going to be safe in this conversation because I've already inoculated them with who I am and what I've gone through. And sometimes that's all people need to take that first step. And really, in any kind of healing journey, it's the path of least resistance. As long as you can find that start point, and that was my mentality of just give them a start point. I'm here, you need me, I will answer the phone. I'll be there in a heartbeat if you need to talk. And I would say I've been highly utilized in the mental health realm of things. Tons of referrals to some doctors in our community that have been a saving grace for our department. I feel there's a lot of gratitude, like I said, to be able to help in any way, shape, or form, and the fact that it's been received.
Yeah, and we know that recovering out loud saves lives, and it does take courage. It does take courage, and I really appreciate the willingness that you both have to speak up and to continue to keep these conversations going in so many different spaces. I know that there's a lot of comments that have come in, even in the chat here, of people who are just very grateful and appreciate the work that you're both doing. And you had said that people trust you because you share your personal story. It's one thing when someone has the professional skills and experience to be able to help somebody, but I find that especially for spaces like this in first responder communities, knowing that someone truly gets it can be that extra, thing that can make someone feel that it's okay for them to be honest. It's okay to be real because I'm actually talking to somebody who knows what this is like. Someone isn't just going to be giving me lip service and saying, it's okay to not be okay, and we're going to support you, and I got you. It's someone who's saying, I actually do know what it's like. I know what it's like when you're laying in your bed and you can't shut down your brain. I know what it's like when you're walking through a mall and you're hypervigilant and you can't switch off. I know what it's like when you can't turn off that last call that you had. And those are the lived experiences that are a lot of people are not talking about. So having you both share this and to be able to normalize it and humanize it for others, I'm hoping that we can continue to see a movement in our mental health first responder communities and more people come forward. And I would like to see a lot of movement also in leadership. I know that sometimes there is a disconnect when people are moved into leadership positions, but a lot of the leadership in first responder services that moved up the ranks have seen a lot too, and they're not talking about it. So there's a whole other layer in that as well. Yeah. So do we have any questions in the chat, Jody?
Yeah, we can take a look and see. There was kind of a piece that I wanted to
Sure.
reflect on. I was really, I thought the metaphor that you gave, James, around self-sacrifice to be quite potent, like the metaphor of setting yourself on fire to warm others around you. And I think, one of the benefits of being in a first responder role is that really strong sense of community, being there for each other, but you're talking about kind of the shadow side of that. And so I'm just curious if either of you have any recommendations for people who are feeling that burden to be there for their brothers and sisters, but yet are struggling themselves. What would be your recommendations for them?
That one person can't keep an entire service afloat. One person cannot save a platoon. And when I first went off work, I was fixated on, I have to be there because I have to keep my team safe. And if something happens and I'm not there, I'm going to blame myself. And that was a burden I didn't have to bear. So,
Yeah.
we're all not that important. And that's the way we got to see it, right? And unfortunately, that's the reality. We're not that important, but you are that important to your family. You are that important to yourself.
And as a model too, right? When you say my health and well-being is important, I need to take care of this, you're helping in a different way because you're modeling what it is to love yourself, right? Coming back to what you were saying before.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything, Ryan, that you would add to that?
It's just what James said. Like, even when you need to take a day, and it could be for whatever reason, there's always going to be that guilt, right? In the back of your head. As a first responder, you're never going to get rid of it. It's like no other job. If you don't go to work and somebody gets hurt or something happens, it's not, FOMO. It's, would me having been there change the outcome, right? And in reality, of course it would change the outcome because you weren't there. And if you are there, something along the way is going to change. But, you have to, let it go. We have those days for a reason. I always just tell people, make sure it's a good reason that you're taking the day, right? Because if it's just, I wanted to go, drink with my buddies, you're going to have a harder time if something's happened than if, my family needed me. It was family time. I just needed a break. I wasn't engaged and I was going to be more dangerous if I was there. You know what I mean? Like if the reason you're not going is something that you can live with, if something happens, then there's nothing that, anybody's going to be able to say about that. Your kid's birthday, take your kid's birthday off. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you're not doing it for a frivolous reason, right? Gone are the days where we have to miss birthdays and anniversaries for the job. Those are the days our supervisors should know ahead of time. And I presented that to supervisors and specialty units to say you should have a calendar with all your team's important dates and then absolve them of the responsibility to be at work. And if something's happening, you can tell them to go home because that's an important day for them because they're never going to tell you.
Yeah.
And the takeaway is when you go home as that team member and your wife is surprised or your partner's surprised and you're like, yeah, well, the boss knew this was our anniversary, so he cut me loose early. Well, that builds trust and it builds,
Mhm.
A harder worker. You know what I mean? Like when a supervisor or a boss takes care of you, it's proven that your team and your members are going to work harder for you if they think you care about them. Well, nothing says, your boss cares about you more than him knowing important dates in your life. And then you don't have to, sell it to your team. They know. Well, unless you both have an anniversary on the same day, which happens, I'm sure.
That's
But
actually one of our questions that maybe you can enhance a little bit was, do you have any suggestions for supervisors to help break through those barriers that keep officers from opening up and sharing when they are not doing well? I
they
know.
have to open up themselves.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have to share their experience. And when someone's gone through something or they know somebody's done something that's positive in a mental health, aspect, if that's what the focus is, that's what's gonna work. Like an email never cuts it in my books. I need someone to stand up and it's a vulnerable thing to do, right? It's hard. Most people, including myself, choke up a little bit the first time. You have that little cough or that little moment where you're about to bare your soul a little bit and you have no idea what the reaction's going to be. And sometimes it's crickets. Um, Often after people come up and talk to you after, right? When it's safe for them to do so and when no one else is going to hear what's going on, right? But it goes for everything. You want to promote physical health. You got to be saying, okay, we need you guys to be more focused on doing this fitness program or getting your pin for the year, right? I got my pin. I haven't done it in so long. It's important, right?
Mhm.
No different than a mental health check-in, right? They do promote our Peer Connect app, but I don't think any of them have said I'm on it in a lineup presentation. They've just said everybody should sign up for this, but not one of our supervisors, including our staff sergeant, has said I've signed up for the Peer Connect app. This is why you should do it. If you want to talk to me about it after, I can close my door and we can chat. Those
Yeah.
conversations are still not happening, right?
Right. And that's why I'm glad that you brought that up, and I hope that these are conversation starters. And I was thinking about your referencing physical fitness in terms of that being so normalized. You take care of your physical health, but I've I've seen how you've been able to bridge that connection between physical wellness, physical health, and mental wellness. So I wanted to know if you want to take a few minutes to just let people know the work that you do in terms of you're very active. You do the push-ups challenge. You're always on the bike, like you're always doing these. And I think that's a great way. That's a great way to connect with people who are in spaces where that part of health is normalized, physical health, and be able to bridge that connection into mental health conversations.
Well, I could talk probably for an hour on that. And James too, like the amount of work he does within our organization with people that need direction in relation to physical health is huge. And I'm sure in those training sessions, there are likely some closed door conversations about the mental health side of it, right? The push-up challenge, the memorial runs and the memorial ride, and all those are well established. But it's still a hard push, right, to get people engaged in that. And a lot of it is because it appears like a very daunting task. But the push-up challenge for mental health, the All Okay, they do a 22 push-ups on the 22nd of February, uh, recognizing mental health and suicide within first responders um, and the military. And they're easy conversations because you're focusing mainly in the beginning, and the majority of what's being seen is the physical side. But you can push that narrative with the mental health side of things that kind of subconsciously gets into people's heads. And then, not unknowingly, but they're not focusing on the fact that they're supporting mental health, but they're seeing the messaging, they're seeing all the reasons why the challenge is happening, and it has a kind of a sneaky effect to get people kind of involved, which is kind of nice. And but like I tell James all the time, when I try to get people involved in it, and I ask people if they want to do some push-ups with me for something I'm doing, and it's going to be on social media, it's like asking somebody out on a first date. Like, you got to be willing and ready to be turned down, and then not be upset about it, and not stop you from asking somebody else,
Yeah.
right, to do the challenge. And it took a lot, because there's, even though it's well known, and I promote it, and I talk to people about it, and I get it put around the station, it's still hard to have that one-on-one conversation with somebody that you don't know how they're going to answer you. I know no one's going to, like, be completely offended and yell at me for asking them. But it still, catches you a little bit, because no one likes to get turned down.
Yeah.
but but for the most part, people guilt into it a little bit. And I never ask on camera, just in case they can't do 10. Who knows, right? But there's an RCMP officer out west that's doing it's called It Starts with 10. Mike's his name. He's a Mountie out there, and he started a physical fitness challenge of just push-ups, and started adding in the mental health benefits of being prepared for duty, right? And that's huge, right? So if you can get that connection together and blend the benefit of being physically fit and physically ready to how important that is for your mental health, then it's really can go hand in hand. But it's still a bit of a tough sell.
I think it's a creative way to facilitate those conversations, for sure.
Yeah.
And no doubt, yeah. I think sometimes people like to just kind of watch, and it still matters. Even if people are actively participating, they're still watching, and they're still being observers of the work that you're doing and the messages that you're both sending. So yeah. We're almost out of time, but I just wanted to check in to see if either of you had any last reflections or thoughts that you wanted to share with us, or anybody that is maybe tuning in right now.
I probably have just two quick thoughts to leave you with.
Okay.
And they're quotes that I kind of, live by in a way. One would be always choose the pain of progress over the pain of trauma or mental illness, right? You're going to be in pain, get something for it, something to push you forward. The second would be faith and fear require you to believe in something you cannot see. Choose wisely, right? We're so inundated with fear in this profession when it comes to mental illness, when it comes to if I'm struggling, because we catastrophize and find the worst case scenario of it. If you can be fearful, you can also be faithful, and think about, what if this does work out? If I do reach out, you can, rationalize all the bad scenarios, but what if this actually helps? What if going to this therapist works? What if going to this peer supporter, this supervisor, and finally saying, I can't do this, I'm not okay. what will that look like? And think about the positive benefits through that.
I love that. Yeah.
For me, it would just be, don't give in to the negative. Keep doing what you're doing. If you're speaking out about mental health, if you are going out to events, just keep doing it, and keep, pushing off that X, as one of my friends says, right? Every day, get up, do the things you need to do, commit to those challenges, and, be that positive person that people are going to see. Like, it's funny, like James will tell you, if anybody asks me how my day's going, I always tell them I'm just happy to be here. And they all say, I don't believe you. And my response is always, well, you got to be here. You might as well be happy about it.
There you go.
And but you gotta find something to be happy about. So I know Beyond the Blue has some cards out, and they're check-in cards. What went well today? What didn't go well today? What triggered you? And have those conversations in your head, right? And if you could change something, what would it be, right? Same thing with your family. What went well today? What didn't go well today? Is something happened that you're unhappy about, and what can we do to make it better, right? Or how can we address those? And the work one's tough, because it often feels like with pushing for mental health and getting people involved is like taking 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. But the philosophy of it is, well, now you're only 8 steps away from where you wanted to be. So if you every day you're taking 2 steps, you may be moving back, but you're now 4 steps, 6 steps, wherever. And people can't hide from the narrative as much as we'll say administration isn't giving it maybe the voice it needs. The more you speak out about it, the more you're open about it, the more you push that envelope in the narrative that they can't ignore, the more it normalizes. And eventually it's just going to be everywhere. We're going to see it everywhere, and it's going to catch more people. We just got to keep trying, I guess. I'm running out of time. I got 6 years left, so I got a lot of things to get going before I can be satisfied.
I'd just like to really piggyback really quick on that. We've spoken about, administration, organizations, and use those general words in support, right? Like, we want that perfect scenario of how to take care of our people. But the reality is, if you're in this profession, take care of the person beside you. That's how we create a different narrative in self-care. It's being that energy you want to see, not being adaptable to an already toxic or negative energy. Be that person to help the person beside you, then we will move forward together.
Be the change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love
Be the
that.
change. Yeah.
Thank you both. This was a really, really great, insightful conversation. I'm definitely walking away with a lot of thoughts and thinking about how we can continue to move forward and move away from that messy middle, even in the work that we do. I appreciate you both having the courage and being honest. We know that that's hard to do in this profession sometimes. But it's a starting point to be an example for others, to be okay, to come forward and to say that this is hard work, and to want to be able to have someone to talk about it and to get the support that they need and deserve. So thank you both. I just want to mention that there were questions that were asked in our last conversation that we did in December, that we are going to be doing a video to answer those questions that will be coming out in February. So some of you who were tuning into the last conversation that Jen and Jody and I did, we will be answering those questions in a video coming in February. And on our next Compassionate Response Humanizing Conversations that we will have coming out in March, myself and my colleague Karen will be talking about being a first responder family, being a first responder spouse, and navigating the complexities of that. So be sure to look for that to tune in. I hope the rest of the week is kind to you all, and thanks for being with us in this space today.
Thanks so much. Bye.